Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Newshour, India's voice to the world. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. Coming up in the next hour. US President Donald Trump urges Russian President Putin to spare lives of Ukrainian soldiers encircled in Russia's Kursk region.
Position militarily with quite a few Ukrainian soldiers, but hopefully nothing will happen with that. I've asked them not to let anything happen, and I hope that nothing happens.
India slams Pakistan at UN for unjustified claims. Indian envoy says Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. Balochistan Liberation Army claims to have killed all 214 Pakistani military hostages taken in train hijack incident. Head of the ISIS in Iraq and Syria killed in Iraq in coordinated operation involving US, Iraqi and Kurdish forces. SpaceX and NASA launch mission to bring back astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore and two others who have been stranded on the International Space Station for 9 months. President Putin said that Russia will spare the lives of Ukrainian soldiers in its western Kursk region if Kyiv orders them to surrender. Putin's remarks came after US President Donald Trump urged him to avoid a horrible massacre there. A report.
Diplomatic efforts are underway to end Russia-Ukraine conflict. On Friday, US President Donald Trump said United States has held productive talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin on ceasefire deal. Trump wrote, "We had a very good and productive discussions with President Vladimir Putin of Russia, and there is a very good chance that this horrible, bloody war can finally come to an end. But at this very moment, thousands of Ukrainian troops are completely surrounded by the Russian military and in a very bad and vulnerable position. I have strongly requested to President Putin that their lives be spared." Trump said he sees good news coming out of Russia and he thinks Russia will make a deal on the Ukraine war.
We've had some pretty good news coming out of Russia. We're hearing good things. Who knows, but we're hearing good things. They're in a very strong position militarily with quite a few Ukrainian soldiers, but hopefully nothing will happen with that. I've asked them not to let anything happen, and I hope that nothing happens. In the field, there's a very vulnerable group of Ukrainian soldiers right now that are actually surrounded. And that's not good because we don't want them to die. Enough people have died. So we'll see what happens with regard to all of it. But I'm getting, from the standpoint about a ceasefire and ultimately a deal, some pretty good vibes coming out of Russia.
In response, Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Friday that Russia will guarantee the safety of Ukrainian troops in the Kursk region if they surrender.
At the same time, we understand President Trump's call to be guided by humanitarian considerations with respect to these servicemen. In this regard, I would like to emphasize that if they lay down their arms and surrender, they will be guaranteed life and decent treatment in accordance with international law and the laws of the Russian Federation. For the effective implementation of the US President's call, a corresponding order from the military political leadership of Ukraine for its military units to lay down their arms and surrender is necessary.
A US proposal for a 30-day interim ceasefire has already been accepted by Ukraine.
A lot of diplomacy, a lot of negotiations that can bring peace closer. Now on the table is the American proposal of unconditional silence in the sky, at sea, and on the front. Ukraine accepts this proposal. Rapid movements towards guaranteed security, towards the end of this war, towards a reliable peace. Our team works very well at the meeting in Saudi Arabia. Contacts with the American sides are ongoing.
While Moscow said it would only agree to if certain conditions were met. French President Emmanuel Macron said on Friday that Russia must accept a proposed 30-day ceasefire deal. On battlefield, Russia announced on Friday that its forces had recaptured another settlement in the Kursk region previously held by Ukraine. Russia's emergency services also released images showing the evacuation of civilians from Sudzha. However, Ukraine has denied its forces in Kursk were encircled, describing the claim as a Russian fabrication. Ukraine also held a March on Volunteer Day of Ukraine in central Kiev on March 14. Activists of nationalist youth groups took part in the procession. Bureau Report, DD India.
And Russian President Vladimir Putin also praised Trump for doing everything to improve US-Russia relations.
We know that the new administration headed by President Trump is doing everything to restore at least something of what was practically reduced to zero, destroyed by the previous American administration. This process is not simple, if not complicated, but nevertheless, as everyone knows. I had a telephone conversation with President Trump. The first contacts of our Minister of Foreign Affairs with his American counterpart took place, and the Russian presidential aide Ushakov met with his counterparts. So in general, the situation is starting to move. Let us see what comes out of it.
The town of Sudzha in Kursk region is now officially under Russian control. The area beyond Sudzha, including the supermarket, was the first point captured by Ukrainian forces approximately 7 kilometers from the Ukrainian border in August last year. However, Ukraine's claim that its forces were still in the area has now been proven false, as reported by RT's Murad Ghaziev from the recaptured town of Sudzha.
Sudzha, despite Ukrainian proclamations otherwise, is now firmly under Russian control, recaptured the entire city as well as surrounding settlements. We're in Zaylyonnoshka, which is beyond Sudzha. This is the infamous supermarket, Peterechka, which has been marked by almost every Ukrainian unit that comes this way. And the reason is that this is one of the first big buildings that they see having crossed the border from Ukraine and driving into Sudzha. The entire city is past us down this road. Over there, 7 kilometers from us, is the Ukrainian border. But this again is an infamous supermarket. It was a symbol of Ukraine's incursion into the Kursk. Ukraine's incursion into the Kursk region. The reason we can't dally outside is that there are so many drones flying overhead, Russian and Ukrainian. From the other side, the Ukrainians are desperate to stall Russia's advance towards the border, but just over 24 hours ago, there were still Ukrainian troops where I am standing. This store became an unofficial monument to Ukrainian fighters who headed to Russia's Kursk region for their incursion. For many of them, this was the last place that they would sign. 67,000 casualties suffered by Ukraine over 8 months in their misadventure. Ukraine's claims that it hasn't abandoned Sudzha, that its forces are still inside, is false, and the proof is that we are standing here, right on the westernmost outskirts of the city. This operation has proved to be, this incursion for Ukraine has proved to be an absolute disaster, especially for Zelensky, who vowed to use that territory which they seized in Russia's Kursk region as a chip at the negotiations table to trade away and gain back more what he called Ukrainian lands. That operation has failed completely. Nevertheless, this marks the end of the Battle of Sudzha, and it is very likely that Russian troops and en masse will soon cross into Ukraine, perhaps to establish a buffer zone.
All right, and DD India correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh joins us live now. Hi, Shubhendu. Now with Trump saying that there is a positive sign when it comes to resolving the conflict, what next can we expect going further?
That's right, Siddharth. US President, America, at the moment is expressing a certain cautious optimism as far as the outcome of the ceasefire agreement is concerned. A quick recap would help. Earlier this week, we saw that Steve Witkoff, the American envoy, had meetings with Ukrainian President Zelensky and his convoy. This took place in Saudi Arabia. Ukraine agreed to the ceasefire condition. Two important points: immediate and unconditional ceasefire. Ukraine agreed to both the condition, and then the ball was in Russia's court. Steve Witkoff traveled to Moscow to hold talks with President Putin and his envoy. President Putin in principle appears to have agreed and appreciated the movement towards ceasefire, the idea of a ceasefire, bringing an end to the bloody conflict, as President Donald Trump puts it. But he had slipped in certain nuances, is what is being talked about, certain conditions which Russia says would be important for it to be able to consider any prospect of ceasefire. Meanwhile, given that Russian president has come back with condition, and therefore again making those two words problematic, unconditional and immediate, it has led to Ukrainian President Zelensky calling Russian President manipulative, and he said that it's an old tactic by Russia to delay the prospect of a ceasefire. Ukrainian President has again had tough words for Russia and the Russian leader, but President Donald Trump continues his bonhomie and his sort of positive approach towards Russia. He says that much has been achieved, although there is no clarity about if Russia has in words agreed to the ceasefire prospect, but those conditions being there in the context, it doesn't seem that the ceasefire is happening anytime soon.
All right, so Shubhendu, what can you tell about the conditions that have been set up by Putin to end this conflict? Is there any such thing, and if so, then what?
The conditions are very key to what Russian President Putin has said, and we have to understand that this is in the middle of a very brutal and complex conflict. There is, and he talks about it, there's a 2,000-kilometer long borderline across which fighting is taking place. There are thousands of Ukrainian soldiers fighting in Russia, for example, in parts of Kursk, and similarly, there are hundreds and thousands of Russian soldiers fighting there, present in Ukrainian territory and fighting there. In such a complex battleground, how do you immediately put stop to the violence? What are going to be the tenets of this agreement? Who is going to monitor this sort of peace? These are the questions that President Putin has raised. He's also asked that what if Ukraine takes this opportunity to fall back and regroup and rearm and prepare a month later? There's a 30-day proposal for a ceasefire, and later again tries to attack Russia and Russian territories. Also, it will be important for us to reflect on the previous long-standing demands of Russia as far as any prospect of ceasefire is concerned. Three key points to that. Number one has been that Ukraine must recognize the annexed territories by Russia, namely Crimea and about 4 other regions in the southeastern part of Ukraine. It should be now referred to as Russian territories. Second, after such a recognition, Ukraine soldiers must withdraw from these regions. And third, and perhaps the most important one, is that Ukraine must pledge to not seek NATO membership. So in the context of Russia raising these points, it does become very, very difficult As it is, we know that Ukrainian president has lambasted Russian president about being manipulative, not agreeing to the ceasefire when one party had agreed unconditionally. So in that sense, in the context of these demands and issues flagged by Russian president, the way forward still appears complex.
All right, Shubhendu, Russia has yet to agree to US proposed ceasefire deal, and US President Donald Trump hopeful of resolving this particular conflict, and Russia has put conditions to end the conflict. We'll have to wait and see what happens next, but we leave it there. Thank you so much for joining in. And still to come on DD India Newshour. Several homes destroyed as wildfires rage across Oklahoma. UK charges Russian captain Vladimir Motin of a container ship that crashed into a US tanker in the North Sea. And 8th summit between the leaders of the EU and South Africa concludes in Cape Town.
What is more important, fixing the present or planning for the future? Innovators across the globe rethinking the way we live to secure a better future for us.
I found out about the Rahi trade-in scheme. I went to the agency and discovered that I could receive a subsidy for this e-rickshaw.
We basically mirror that same process, but instead of water for one of our solutions, we use blocks, powering about 35,000 homes.
Our goal is to send a message that it's important to fight for better urban air quality, and I think Liquid 3 sends that message.
We prepare fish amino acid by mixing the fish waste with jaggery. It is also an excellent organic fertilizer for plants and trees.
We're moving from the lab stage to industrial scale production. We still have a few challenges to deal with, but we've seen that it works.
You're watching DD India News on. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. India slammed Pakistan at UN for its unjustified claims. Delivering India's statement at the meeting to commemorate the International Day to Combat Islamophobia, India's permanent representative to the UN, P. Harish, said that Jammu and Kashmir was, is and will always be an integral part of India.
The former Foreign Secretary of Pakistan today has made an unjustified reference to the Indian Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Frequent references will neither validate their claim nor justify their practice of cross-border terrorism. The fanatical mindset of this nation is well known, as also its record of bigotry. Such efforts will not change the reality that Jammu and Kashmir was, is and will always be an integral part of India.
While condemning the religious intolerance against Muslims, the Indian envoy also noted that religious discrimination is a broader challenge that affects followers of all faiths.
We stand united with the UN membership in condemning incidents of religious intolerance against Muslims. However, it's also imperative to recognize that religious discrimination is a broader challenge that affects followers of all faiths. We strongly believe that the path to meaningful progress lies in acknowledging that religiophobia in its various forms threatens the fabric of our diverse global society.
The Baloch Liberation Army has claimed to have executed all 214 hostages captured during the Jafar Express passenger train hijacking in Balochistan. The BLA said that Pakistani forces failed to respond to a 48-hour ultimatum for a prisoner exchange, leading to the mass execution. It added that its fighters took their own lives after killing the hostages and engaging Pakistani soldiers. The BLA hijacked the train on 11th of March. The US military killed the top ISIS leader known as Abu Khadija and another ISIS operative in an airstrike conducted in cooperation with Iraq. Taking to social media platform Truth, US President Donald Trump shared the news. The US Central Command said that strike took place on Thursday and a DNA test confirmed the deceased identity as Abu Khadija. The ISIS chief was global ISIS 2 leader who maintained responsibility for operations, logistics and planning conducted by ISIS globally. In the US, wildfires destroyed several homes in the city of Stillwater across Oklahoma State on Friday. City's emergency management agency issued immediate evacuation orders to its residents as active wildfires burned in many areas of the city. As multiple fires continued to rage, thousands of residents were left without power. Number of highways were closed, making travel hazardous and difficult for the people of Oklahoma. The United Kingdom has charged the Russian captain Vladimir Putin of a container ship that crashed into a US tanker in the North Sea earlier this week. The Russian captain has been charged of manslaughter and gross negligence and will be presented in court on Saturday. The Solong vessel hit the Stena Immaculate tanker carrying military jet fuel at close to full speed off UK shore on Monday, causing huge fires and explosions and spilled jet fuel into the sea. Supporters gathered in large numbers in Seoul for impeached South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol after a court decision to cancel Yoon's arrest warrant. The Constitutional Court is expected to announce whether it upholds the impeachment of Yoon this month over his declaration of martial law. The suspended president faces being removed from office if the court upholds parliament's impeachment. Yoon is facing trial on insurrection charges over a brief imposition of martial law. The Trump administration is mulling a sweeping travel ban targeting citizens of over 40 countries, according to sources and an internal memo. The proposed ban would be broader than previous restrictions, with a red list of 11 countries whose citizens would be barred from entering the US. These countries include Afghanistan, Cuba, Iran, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Venezuela and Yemen. An orange list of 10 countries would face restricted travel, with affluent business travelers potentially exempt. The list is subject to change as officials review and provide feedback. The administration's consideration of the expanded ban has sparked concerns about its potential impact on global relations and travel. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has said that his country and Azerbaijan will not deploy third country forces along their border after the two sides sign a peace agreement. Pashinyan briefed Russian President Vladimir Putin on finalized draft peace agreement with Azerbaijan in a phone call. Earlier, officials in Yerevan and Baku said they had agreed the text of a peace agreement to end more than 3 decades of conflict between their countries, a sudden breakthrough in a fitful and often bitter peace process. Russian peacekeepers completed a withdrawal last May from Karabakh, a region in Azerbaijan that had a mostly Armenian population and which Azeri forces recaptured in a lightning offensive in September 2023. But Moscow still has personnel in Armenia along its long border with Azerbaijan. Bolivia is facing a severe crisis with long queues forming in La Paz, due in fears of scarcity of basic goods and a worsening fuel shortage. People have been lining up outside supermarkets since early morning to buy essential items at inflated prices, fearing that food may go out of stock. Citizens expressed frustration over the shortages and the long lines, drawing parallels with economic struggles in Cuba and Venezuela. The government has introduced measures to mitigate the crisis, including reducing the use of official vehicles and promoting remote work and virtual classes. The fuel shortage has attributed to a decline in foreign currency reserves over the last decade and dwindling local gas production. The President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, represented the European Union at the 8th European Union South Africa Summit in Cape Town. The summit provided an important opportunity to advance discussions on pressing global and regional issues, which were also part of South Africa's G20 presidency, and to address current geopolitical challenges. DD India correspondent Nazanin Ismail reports.
We have reached the conclusion of the 8th European Union South Africa Summit, a crucial meeting that brought together leaders to discuss trade, security, climate change and global cooperation.
Today's summit focus on a number of issues that were covered and discussed during our summit. And they focus on strengthening our trade and investment relations, which are vital for the growth of our economies and the achievement of our development goals as South Africa.
At the summit, leaders focused on key areas of cooperation. Economic ties were a major topic, with discussions on boosting trade and investment. Security was also high on the agenda. Leaders discussed regional stability and global conflicts, including Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, the situation in the Middle East, and the current escalation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Climate change featured prominently, with commitments to renewable energy and sustainability. However, there were some points of tension, particularly on trade policies and geopolitical issues. Despite this, both sides agreed to strengthen dialogue and cooperation moving forward.
Together, we have just concluded a highly successful European Union South African summit, the first one in 7 years, but one that could not have come at a more crucial moment. The world has changed significantly since our last meeting. We have faced global pandemic and devastating conflicts, including Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, the crisis in the Middle East, and dramatic conflicts in the African continent.
Today it serves as the perfect backdrop for a new chapter in European Union South African relations. My dear Cyril, just 2 weeks ago I stood at the Gandhi Memorial in New Delhi and I reflected on the 21 years Gandhi spent here in South Africa, where he forged the principles that shaped his journey as a global leader. And we can take it as a sign that Europe's next crucial partnership must be with South Africa, a regional powerhouse, a strong voice for the global South. We both are vibrant democracies. We both have chosen unity in diversity. And we are both striving for a safe and prosperous future for our people.
This summit reaffirmed the strong partnership between the European Union and South Africa. While challenges still remain, both parties demonstrated a clear commitment to cooperation. The next steps will be critical in ensuring that these agreements lead to meaningful action. I'm Nazneen for DD India, Tynhuys, Cape Town, South Africa.
Cuba faced a nationwide blackout on Friday following yet another failure in its national electricity grid. The grid failure follows a string of nationwide blackouts last year that plunged Cuba's frail and antiquated power generation system into near total disarray, stressed by fuel shortages, natural disaster and economic crisis. Eyewitness footage captured flames and smoke from the engine of American Airlines Flight 1006 on Thursday as the aircraft taxied to the gate at the Denver International Airport in the United States. The flight carried 172 passengers and 6 crew members, all of whom safely evacuated. Sri Lanka launched wildlife census on Saturday to manage animal populations and to address agricultural losses. The initiative follows a nationwide power blackout in February caused by a monkey tampering with power lines, which led to 3 days of power cuts. And still to come on the India Newshour. We will be joined by an expert to bring you in-depth details of where the Ukraine conflict currently stands and what is Trump's take on it. CEC Gyanesh Kumar calls for discussion with Home Secretary CEO UIDAI on linking of EPIC and Aadhaar on March 18.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy, always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium, we'll get you centered with the economic brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India.
You're watching DD India Newshour. I am Siddharth Bharadwaj. Now, going back to our top story, where Russian President Putin said that Russia will spare the lives of Ukrainian soldiers in its western Kursk region if Kyiv orders them to surrender. He apparently has come out with a list of demands to end the conflict between the two nations. Now, to discuss more on this, we've been joined by Mr. Atul Aneja, Foreign Affairs expert. Sir, warmly welcome you to this broadcast today. Thank you so much for joining in. To begin with, sir, Trump has praised talks held with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and he's hopeful that some solution will definitely come out. How do you analyze this particular situation?
I think it's moving in a positive direction, Siddharth, because initially there were these talks with Zelensky, with the Ukrainians and the Americans, and following those talks, there was an agreement with the Ukrainians of a 1-month ceasefire. Now, the Russians, were not really that forthcoming on that particular possibility because they were not sure what was to follow after the or within the 1-month ceasefire. So those details the Russians wanted to know, or at least an outline of them. What would the ceasefire should lead to a roadmap for a bigger settlement.
That's what the Russians said.
That's what the Russians said. And I think yesterday's talks were very constructive because I think those particular possible details have been spelled out to a certain extent, and that explains guarded optimism coming out from the Kremlin.
Indeed.
About the prospects of a deal, starting with the ceasefire, but it's not just going to be a passive ceasefire in the sense there's possibility going to be a lot of activity in terms of concrete action which needs to be done, and a broad understanding of a settlement with the Ukrainians. And that's where we are right now. And that's where the statement is coming out from President Putin about the Kursk region situation. I think that's very significant because the Russians are demonstrating to the world that they have won back their lost territory and they are on a military high. So psychologically, that makes a difference. And Siddharth, we saw President Putin in military uniform.
Yeah. That's a rare sight.
Rare sight, but to symbolize that, that you are now going full steam ahead in your military operation. Those are optics necessary to put pressure before the possibility of a ceasefire. And it was a statement of intent that, the Russians are not going overboard for a ceasefire. But yes, they would like to go in for a talks on a ceasefire from a position of strength. I think that was a symbolism which was coming out of there. So we're moving forward gradually and guardedly in this direction. But definitely there is a
ray of hope.
Ray of hope and a sign of some. We are moving towards a breakthrough between the Americans and the Russians. I mean, we're not there as yet, but it's sort of channeled in that direction now. There seems to have been an understanding reached with the Americans and the Russians. So the pieces are moving, Siddharth, from the Ukrainian track, that the US-Ukraine track, the US-Russia track. So we are sort of the ray of hope is correct, and steadily moving in some kind of a convergence. And the next diplomacy for the next few days is going to be very crucial as to there is a complete narrowing of differences, and then we move to stage 2.
So we were talking about the ceasefire deal, and as far as this US proposed ceasefire deal is concerned, earlier this week Ukraine accepted the US proposed ceasefire deal, which Russia is yet to agree to, like you were also saying. Do you think this could be the first step towards ending this particular conflict and this should take place?
I think so. You see, the Russian reluctance of the ceasefire deal, we were talking about it. There was because the latest talks had not taken place then. Events are moving too fast. So earlier the Russians didn't have details, but with the latest visit by the US official to Russia, I think there's been greater clarity of a forward movement of a roadmap. What after ceasefire? I mean, that was the question really. Okay, we stop fighting, but what happens then? So those details are very necessary because Russia, as
maybe, sir, during that phase, do you think that when the ceasefire will be implemented, a 30 days ceasefire, between that particular time, all the deals, all the other formalities, whatever the Russians want to say, whatever the Ukrainians want to put on the table, all those things will be done?
Those will be the topics of discussion during that time. Yeah. In fact, ahead of that time, I think this is going to be, going to be discussed. Ahead of that, specifically, if we go, okay, now the Americans have hinted that the Ukrainians are going to have a territorial loss. But then, how do you get convergence over there? The Russians, for example, if they move forward in the Donbas area, will it be up to Sumy, so that they have a buffer created, or will it be beyond Sumy? So those are the kind of details which will be discussed broadly even before the ceasefire is implemented. So that's one. What happens to the other demands of the Russians? For example, they would not. They completely reject the possibility of Ukraine joining the NATO.
Yeah, that's a old. Relatively old demand, but yeah,
Right.
the one of the biggest and the first demand, which Russia has.
Third, the neo-Nazi groups which have come up, the Azov battalion, for example. What happens to them? Will they be disarmed, etc.? So those are the kind of Siddharth, the details or the topics which have to be. There has to be some clarity on that. Not going to be a complete clarity, but at least a framework for a roadmap of what happens next. Once you are there, I think only then will there be a durable ceasefire agreed to. Things are moving. Diplomacy is moving very fast, though.
Pieces are moving, like you said.
Oh yeah, it's moving at a rapid speed, so it might happen soon, but it all depends on some kind of a broad understanding that has to be reached before that. It's not the Russians are showing that they're not desperate for a ceasefire. Yet at the same time, the Russians have to preserve the equation with the Americans. For the first time, Americans and the Russians are coming together, and Europeans are getting sidelined. This is a historic geopolitical opportunity for the Russians. I mean, they cannot play such a hard ball that it antagonizes the Americans. So they'll have to find a midway point where the Americans are also with them, and yet their core strategic goals in Ukraine are also accomplished.
Sir, how do you see this particular conflict? How soon do you see this particular conflict ending? By looking at the present situation.
Tough one, but I would say that not putting a specific timeline, but the way things are moving, it might happen pretty soon. Pretty soon, I would not like to define whether it's going to be a week or 10 days, but we are moving in that direction. The wheels have started turning and moving in the direction of a ceasefire. All depends on this kind of behind the scenes bargaining which will go on now on core demands of the Russians, and of course the Ukrainians also are going to make their demands. So that's something, and the Americans are the key players here in getting this done. But I think my optimism is much more today than it was 3 days ago when Marco Rubio was the US Secretary of State, was almost threatening the Russians that if you don't come on board, then we'll start resupplying weaponry and all the support.
And then US President Donald Trump coming out and saying that he's quite hopeful when it comes to resolving the Ukraine conflict.
So then it turns from Marco Rubio to the optimism expressed by that, followed by the visit to Moscow. I think that is very crucial. Whitaker, his visit to Moscow was very, very important. And Putin's statement, both that he in principle is for a ceasefire, but at the same time showing his battle fatigues, that I am not desperate for it. And I am on a high because I have liberated Kursk and my forces are there to move forward if required. So, it's sort of balanced here for a kind of a conversation on the nitty-gritty of ceasefire and post-ceasefire sort of a structure, which is acceptable to all, especially the Americans and the Russians, because I really don't think Trump was right when he told Zelensky, you don't have too many cards. They are right now on the defensive, to be honest.
Very quickly, sir, one thing more. Putin had said the idea of a ceasefire was right and we support it, but there are nuances and set out a number of tough conditions for peace. What do you make out of this? What do you understand when he said this?
See,
accepting and saying that the deal is good, but there are some nuances.
Correct. So it's caveats. It's important. Ceasefire, he's not opposed, because if he says he's opposed to ceasefire, he antagonizes the Americans completely. So he can't do that. Right? But then nuances is important, because he has his own domestic constituency, that is the Russians. I mean, you have been fighting for since 2022. So you have to show your domestic audience that you have made certain gains. So you can't just go ahead with that. So the word nuances is important, which is also addressing his domestic constituency, as well as sort of finishing with Trump that I am with you on ceasefire, but something more has to be done. And then he spells out those specifics. Again, those are maximalist sort of demands which he's making. So now the stage is set for the bargain. And the final diplomacy would be how much can the Russians be pushed back, and what will be the bottom line from either side. That there are red lines which Russians will have, which probably the Americans and the Americans will have and the Ukrainians will have. So that's where we are at this stage. This is the final bit of bargaining which will now go on before we enter into a new phase of conflict resolution, Siddharth.
All right, sir. Wonderful analysis. We leave it there. Thank you so much for joining in on the broadcast.
You're welcome, Siddharth.
The Indian Space Research Organisation on Friday successfully conducted the flight acceptance hot testing of the cryogenic engine identified for the 6th operational mission of Launch Vehicle Mark III in Tamil Nadu. In a statement, ISRO said the hot test was performed differently this time, with the engine being tested for a longer duration of 100 seconds for the first time using an innovative nozzle protection system under non-vacuum conditions. As per the statement, performance of the CE-20 engine met all the test objectives and the parameters were closely matching with the predictions during the entire duration of the test. India's Home Minister Amit Shah on Saturday inaugurated the newly constructed administrative building of Lachit Borphukan Police Academy at Doordarshan in northeastern state of Assam. After inaugurating the first phase of the police academy, the minister also laid the foundation stone of the academy's housing project and was accompanied by State Chief Minister Dr. Himanta Biswa Sarma and Union Ports, Shipping and Waterways Minister Sarbananda Sonowal, along with several ministers and MLAs. Addressing the gathering, Amit Shah highlighted that there is no violence in the state.
आज मैं असम सरकार को बधाई देना चाहता हूं। 8 साल में ऐसा परिवर्तन हुआ। ये लचित बरफुकन एकेडमी में 2000 पुलिस कर्मी गोवा और मणिपुर के ट्रेनिंग लिए हैं। हमारा असम शांत हो गया।
Home Minister also attended a ceremony in Mizoram marking the relocation of the Assam Rifles Battalion headquarters. The event featured a ceremonial exchange of maps symbolizing the official handover of key facilities to the state government. The land will now be reserved for public use under the Restriction of Use of Transferred Land Act. India's Electronics and Information Technology Minister Ashwani Vaishnav inaugurated a private electronics factory, Zetwerk, in South Indian state of Tamil Nadu's Tiruvallur district on Saturday. The minister also laid the foundation stone for expansion projects at the facility. The event marked a significant step in India's journey to becoming a global hub for electronics production. Speaking at the event, the minister emphasized the growing importance of electronics in India's export portfolio. He also highlighted that electronics have become the second largest exported item in India, and the government of India is committed to boosting electronics production in the country.
Electronics has become the second largest export item in the country, overtaking many conventional industries which had developed export over decades. And just see, within 1 decade, electronics has become the second largest. And this was possible primarily because of a very clear thinking and very focused execution. And in the execution, the state governments have all supported. So I thank all the state governments, including the government of Tamil Nadu, for all the support which has come in execution of Prime Minister Modi ji's vision.
In a significant technological milestone, India's Electronics and Information Technology Minister Ashwini Vaishnav witnessed the demonstration of a sub-prototype model of the futuristic Hyperloop transportation system in Chennai on Saturday. The demonstration showcased the potential of Hyperloop technology as a revolutionary mode of transportation, promising ultra-high-speed travel in a sustainable and cost-effective manner. The sub-prototype highlighted India's commitment to embracing cutting-edge innovation in the transportation sector. Food and Consumer Affairs Minister Prahlad Joshi on Saturday emphasized the need for sustainable lifestyle options that protect consumers' rights and needs. Speaking at a World Consumer Rights Day webinar titled A Just Transition to Sustainable Lifestyle, he highlighted that sustainability is deeply rooted in Indian culture and that the government is driving it forward with responsible consumer policies. Minister of State for Food and Consumer Affairs B.L. Verma and other senior ministry officials also attended the webinar.
Consumer protection and fostering the sustainability have been part of Indian culture from ancient times and formed the core of its administration. Expansion of eco-labeling programs to strengthening the regulatory framework against the greenwashing. We are committed to ensuring that the consumers are well informed and protected against the misleading claims.
Union Minister Joshi further said the government is actively working to make sustainable products more affordable and accessible and further envisioned to follow Mahatma Gandhi's zero carbon lifestyle.
Through the Price Monitoring Mechanism and Price Stabilization Fund, the Department of Consumer Affairs aims to control price volatility and ensure the affordable essential commodities for the consumers. However, it is necessary that the consumer also understand their shared responsibility towards the society by following Mahatma Gandhi ji, who talked about the zero carbon lifestyle and calls for the picking the most sustainable options in daily life choices.
And still to come on DD India Newshour. Indian athletes excel at Special Olympics World Winter Games 2025 in Turin. And also, Delhi Capitals face Mumbai Indians at Women's Premier League 2025 final.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
You're watching DD India Newshour. I am Siddharth Bharadwaj. Hopes for the return of US astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams are at an all-time high as NASA and SpaceX have launched a mission to rescue them from the International Space Station. This report gets you the whole story.
After 9 months of being stuck on the International Space Station, US astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams are a step closer to returning home. This, as SpaceX and NASA have launched a long-awaited mission to the International Space Station where the two have been stuck on the orbital lab.
You know, every crew that comes back goes through a fluid loading protocol just to make sure when they get back that their body is conditioned properly. But they'll go through there's nothing beyond what we'll normally do. They've done training already on the Dragon spacecraft while they've been on orbit to get familiar with the differences in the suits and the umbilicals and the seats and all that. So they'll be ready to come home when we're ready.
The 4-member mission, called Crew 10, comprises 2 Americans, a Russian, and a Japanese who will replace Williams and Wilmore on the ISS. But the duo can only prepare for return once Crew 10 gets adjusted to ISS conditions, which could take few days. They can return to Earth in a capsule that has been attached to the station since September last year as part of the prior Crew 9 mission. Williams and Wilmore reached the ISS in June 2024 for a mission which was originally expected to last a week. But NASA deemed it too risky for the astronauts to return on the Boeing Starliner over propulsion system-related issues. The mission to bring them back was later given to SpaceX, but the launch was delayed due to some technical problems and change in weather. The issue also took a political turn as Elon Musk, a close ally of President Donald Trump, claimed lapses on part of the previous administration led by Joe Biden. NASA has said that Williams and Wilmore have been carrying out scientific research and conducting routine maintenance and have remained safe. The duo's plight highlights risk of human spaceflight. It has also come as a major setback for Boeing's space venture. Bureau Report, DD India.
You're watching DD India Newshour. Time now for sport. And India's remarkable run at the Special Olympics Winter Games continued on day 3 and 4, with the athletes added 15 more medals to the tally. With this latest achievement, India's total medal count has now risen to 24. The alpine skiing Deepak Thakur and Giridhar displayed exceptional skill to clinch gold medals, while Abhishek Kumar secured silver in the novice super category. Radha Devi also delivered a stellar performance, earning a silver medal in the intermediate super event. With these achievements, India's athletes continue to shine on the global stage with their hard work and sporting spirit. India's special athletes made the nation proud at Special Olympics World Winter Games 2025 in Turin. Their victories in snowboarding, speed skating and other events prove that determination has no limits. More than medals, their success is inspiring a more inclusive society. Exclusive report by Narayan Singh from Turin.
Special Olympics World Winter Games 2025 in Turin has been a proud moment for India. The athletes have not only won medals but also won hearts. Their victories prove that determination has no limits. From Bharati's double gold in snowboarding to Zarya and Tanshu's medals in speed skating, India's special athletes have made history. Their success is more than personal glory, and it is a step towards a more inclusive society.
मैं सबसे पहले धन्यवाद दूंगा मलिका मैम का, जो उन्होंने इन एथलीट्स के लिए इतना कुछ करा है और जो उनकी सपोर्ट की वजह से हम लोग यहाँ पे पहुँच रहे हैं, और उनकी सपोर्ट की वजह से जो हमारे एथलीट्स हैं मेडल्स ला रहे हैं, बहुत बड़ी अचीवमेंट है हम लोगों के लिए। और बहुत थैंकफुल हमारे जितने भी एथलीट्स हैं, मैम को तहे दिल से धन्यवाद देते हैं, जो उनके सपोर्ट से हम लोग इतना आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। तो ये बहुत बड़ा मंच है एथलीट्स के लिए कि मतलब हमारे इंडिया से बाहर आके हम किसी और कंट्री में जाके हम लोग मेडल्स ला रहे हैं। इट्स अ वेरी गुड अचीवमेंट फॉर एथलीट्स।
For many parents of children with intellectual disabilities, these achievements bring hope. Watching Indian athletes shine on the global stage sends a powerful message. It encourages parents to support their children in sports and believe in their potential. Coach Monica also says these victories will help change society's mindset.
मैं पूरे समाज को, पूरी कम्युनिटी को ये कहना चाहूंगी कि इन बच्चे को, ये बच्चे भी किसी से कम नहीं है, इनको दया की दृष्टि से ना देखें और इनको मोटिवेट करें ताकि ये भी मेन धारा के साथ जुड़ सके और जैसा कि आप देख ही रहे हो इस मंच पे ये बच्चे आके कितना अच्छा प्रदर्शन कर रहे हैं.
This change has been made possible by Special Olympics Bharat, the organization providing training, support, and opportunities to special athletes. These athletes are more than champions, they are symbols of hope. Their success inspires schools, workplaces, and communities to be more inclusive.
The achievements of our special athletes go beyond medals and competition. They challenge stereotypes, inspire change, and pave the way for more inclusive society. Every victory they achieve is a powerful example of the strength of determination and the importance of equal opportunities. When these athletes shine on global stage, they redefine what is possible for individuals with intellectual disabilities. With camera person Satyanarayan, Narayan Singh, DD India, Turin.
The Women's Premier League 2025 final will be played between Delhi Capitals and Mumbai Indians on Saturday at the Brabant Stadium. This is the third time in a row that Delhi Capitals have made it to the final of the 5-team tournament, and the Meg Lanning-led side is looking to win their first title. The Delhi Capitals versus Mumbai Indians battle is a repeat of the inaugural season's finale. The Mumbai Indians won the first season, while Royal Challengers Bengaluru won the second edition. Indian diaspora and Sri Lankans celebrate the Festival of Colours on the beach side in Colombo. Colombo Indians, a grouping of the Indian community, celebrated Holi at Colombo's Mount Lavinia Hotel Beach, which witnessed participation by Indian community, Sri Lankans and other nationals as well. High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, Santosh Jha, and other officials of the Indian mission as well as Sri Lankan government officials also participated in the celebrations. With colours being flung on one another, the event had everyone greeting one another on the festive occasion.
In India, it is people are ready to next season, next level. Then they are coming to celebrate. That's changing. Then this kind of cultural events are making people's their relatives and their relationships are making strengthened. So kind of cultural events making a big happy to the people. They are bringing big happy to the people.
That's all for this edition of DD India Newshour. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms, and you can scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Newshour.